Okay. So good afternoon here from thankfully sunny Boston, Massachusetts today. It is so wonderful to have you joining us for what is a really unique and special opportunity for a locals view of London. My name is Stephanie Foner, and I work in the Office of Alumni Relations at Northeastern on our affinity and domestic engagement team. We bring events just like this to you all. I'm very excited again to have you. And I am so thrilled to be turning the floor over to one of our esteemed alumnus here, MJ Paradiso, who is joining us from London. Go ahead, MJ.
Thanks so much, Stephanie, and great to meet everyone. So yes, I'm sure many of you are sitting in your homes, have been stuck in your homes for quite a while and wanting to get abroad. I've had the opposite problem. I've been in London since last March and have not actually left. So there we go. I'm sitting in a wonderful city, but stuck in my guest room, as you can see now. But want to share a lot around what happens in London, what are the best spots, a really locals guide. And one of the things that I love about London is that it is so easy to get to during normal times. So when I talk about easy to get to and where to go, we're talking about normal times when you can go out and about, because we've been in full lockdown for a while, but we've seen significant numbers of COVID drops, and there's a PM announcement from Boris Johnson tomorrow. So we're fingers crossed, hopefully going in the right direction. But yeah, London's a great town. I came here slightly accidentally. The first time I visited London, I came here and was actually underwhelmed by it. I thought, like, world-class city, London's got to be like New York, very tall buildings. And relatively, London's a very low to the ground city. But then I got to know London and understand the culture and the people and the history behind it. It's such a rich history. A lot of people think historical and they think Henry VIII and the Tudors, but it goes even, earlier than that. It's a true Roman city as well. There were people long before that. And so you have this world of history. You have an economic capital in both new money and old money. You have a political capital. You have a cultural capital. And all of this converges in this one place where humans have existed for literally thousands of years. And it's very accessible. There's tons of flights from every city on the East Coast direct into London. In fact, actually, the flight from Boston to London's potentially a little bit too short. I used to take the 9 p.m. flights, and then 5.5 hours later, I'd be landing in Heathrow, and I wasn't quite ready for breakfast yet. I wanted another hour or two to sleep. So I'll take you through, as you can see here, my favorite restaurants and bar activities, local neighborhoods, hidden gems, things that I love about London. And because I've had so many visitors over the years, I've gotten really good at knowing what people like and what's unique and what stands out, whether you're here for 24 hours, you're here for a week, or you're here for your fourth or fifth time. So I also want to keep this as interactive as possible. So feel free to drop questions in the chat. Let me know right now whether you've been to London before or not, and if so, like, how many times have you been here? I can try and tailor it a little bit that way. And if this is sort of a top place that you're looking to come to once the world opens up again. So let me introduce myself quickly as well. Oops. There we go. So as Stephanie so kindly introduced me, my name is MJ Paradiso. I graduated from Northeastern in 2010 with a degree in international business. So I spent half my time in Boston and half my time in Germany at the partner university in ESB Reutlingen. And then I also did some co-ops. I'm sure everyone wants to know about that because we're Northeastern. That's our signature, right? So I spent 6 months out in Cleveland at GE and 6 months in Frankfurt, Germany at P&G. I moved to London in 2013. The very short version of that story is when I was in Germany and met a lovely Spanish woman. Trying to do long distance relationship, Boston to Barcelona, doesn't work out so well. And so we literally looked at a world map and said, where can we go? We said, let's move to London. We thought it'd be a year or two. It's now 8 years, and we're still in love with the place. And then professionally, I've been in sales in the MarTech space. So I work for a company called Yext, which focuses on the search experience category. But let's jump into London. Enough about me. Okay, I'm seeing, oops, where am I going? Okay. So first thing I always recommend is sort of the central walk around London, especially whether you have 1 day or 3 days. This is what I always do. I always go to Westminster. You get off there. Big Ben has been under construction for 2 or 3 years. They're doing some renovations, but there's this wow moment where you're with guests. You've been on the tube. People are excited in London. You come out and you look up from the tube and there's Big Ben. And that's a great way to start the tour. Now, there is a myth that it rains a lot in London. Yes, it could rain a lot in London, but actually doesn't rain as much as people might think. So I definitely recommend walking and don't let the rain stop you. When you get off at Westminster, this is going to be a whirlwind tour around central London, that heart of London, around the River Thames, where you get to see all the big sites you want. So you'll see things like Buckingham Palace, you'll see things like St. James Park, and you can even touch into Hyde Park, Trafalgar Square, and the museums are around there. If you cross over, there's some great shots on the bridges, especially at Embankment, where you can see both up and down the river and get some beautiful scenes of St. Paul's and the Houses of Westminster, Houses of Parliament in Westminster. Along the South Bank, you have things like the Tate Modern, which is free to go into. You have the Shakespeare Globe Theatre, which is a really cool tour as well. You can go across Millennium Bridge, which gives you amazing views of St. Paul's. This is a picture of me here actually at a place called Madison's. It's in One New Change. It's free to get up there. There's a bar at the top as well if you want to look at that. But it's got really great views of the city and specifically St. Paul. So it's a really good photo stop. And then I kind of make my way back down the north bank of the river as well. You wind up at the Tower of London, Tower Bridge. That is a full day of activity, but there's a lot of sights to see. It's the best way to feel London and check off a lot of boxes. So highly recommend a tour that looks something like this around the heart of London for one of those days. Okay, sorry about that. Having a bit of trouble with the Prezi skipping around, but let's keep going. There we go. One other thing I love to do is spend time in Covent Garden. So Covent Garden is something I normally hit on this tour as you're walking through, but it's a great market. It's that you all went to Boston at some point. It's the Quincy market of London, for a lack of better words. There's a lot of shops. There's a lot of experiential things around there. There's great restaurants. Covent Garden was actually a client of mine. The estate was a client of mine. And the amount of time and effort and consideration they put into things that are curated there, it's a great midpoint on that walking tour to spend a couple of hours shopping at either, really boutique stores or very experiential events right in there. There's a lot of street performers as well. Really great area that just gives you that old town feel, just like Quincy Market would do. So highly recommend that. Another thing I like is castles. There's nothing, whether you're a monarchist or you love the royal family or hate them, doesn't matter. There's something special about these castles. So if you have a day where you can get outside of central London and visit either Windsor Castle or Hampton Court, I would recommend this. Now, this is an either or moment, I would say, unless you have a long time here. These are each one full day by the time you get out there and explore, because there's so much to do. So I would choose which one you want. Here's how I view the difference. Windsor Castle is definitely more of a modern day castle. This is where the Queen typically spends her weekends. This is where the royal wedding between Harry and Meghan happened. It seems like last year, but it's been a couple of years. They're on their second kid now, so it's been a couple of years. This is a working castle. This is essentially the one of the two main residences, this and Buckingham Palace. But it's also a museum. This is where you have the St. George's Church, or working chapel, where you have in the middle of the choir, you have Henry VIII is buried with Jane Seymour, and you have the Queen's parents are buried there, and she will likely be buried there as well. So there's a lot of current history. There's actually a big fire in the Great Hall in the 90s, an electrical fire, and they had to redo it, but they used original techniques and craftsmen to create this hall. And it's a stunning place. So it's a really good place to do a tour of that historical British monarchy. Now, if you're looking for something a little bit more historical than Hampton Court, which is actually just down the road from me, I live in Kingston upon Thames, which is just across the river from Hampton Court. This is the palace that Henry VIII built. And later there's a second wing added where William and Mary were living. And so here you have much more costume actors. There's a historical place. You get to see the size of the Tudor kitchens, and it's a great day out of London. Both are very easily accessible by train and public transportation, but I would recommend one of these in terms of getting outside and seeing that monarchy in action. London has a ton of museums, and I think what you have to do here is prioritize what's best for you. You know, we've got everything from the British Museum. I don't know if you've seen the movie on Netflix called The Dig, which has been promoted quite recently. They've got the permanent exhibit there. You have the Rosetta Stone, which is fascinating. You've got tons of great things in the British Museum that is free. You've got natural history. You've got the Victorian Albert, which is more cultural from several generations ago. You've got the Portrait Gallery. You've got the National Gallery. You've got the Tate Modern, the Tate. You've got the Transport Museum. You've got the Museum of London. You've got tons of museums. So I would definitely recommend finding one or two that work for you. What I find with museums is either they are free or they are like 20 pounds. But either way, there's a lot to cover. There's a lot to do. So just plan accordingly, because these museums are not a quick in and out. You could easily spend hours and hours in each of these. I'll touch on a couple of other museums that I personally really like in a little bit. Another great area to just walk around and be in the atmosphere is Oxford Circus. So Oxford Circus is nothing to do with like Barnum and Bailey or things like that. It's literally the crossing of Oxford Street and Regent Street, the two biggest, shopping streets in the UK. And you have these wonderful, tall white buildings made out of stone, and all the shops you could imagine underneath them. You've got bustling activity. You've got, people just moving around. And then in the area, you've got tons of great restaurants. So I'm actually a mentor with the Alumni Association for students on co-op in London. We typically meet for dinner when we could do that in Oxford Circus area, just because it's such a central location. My new office is there actually. It's just a bustling hub of energy. I'd also recommend Carnaby Street, which is just off the square. It's got tons of little shops and lots of quirks. There's another place that I can't remember the name of it, but it's like lots of different restaurants and things in there. So tons of things to do. If you need a place to walk around, great atmosphere. You're very close to Soho as well for bars and nightlife. So Oxford Circus, definitely want to check it out, whether you want to go shopping or just want to soak in the sights and people watch. Okay, and then we're going to touch on activities in a second, but any questions, Stephanie, at the time? Anything's come up in the chat? Okay, then I'll continue on. So top activities besides things to do. Number one is go to the theater. It seems a little bit crazy because we can't go to the theater right now, but when it opens up again, it's great. And what's really interesting is you get a bunch of really fun people that come through and want to do programs on the West End. So I've actually seen, my wife was traveling for work one weekend, or maybe it was friends, I don't remember what it was. Got last minute tickets, saw Matthew Broderick third row. Wasn't the best show, but hey, you know what? When else do you get to see Matthew Broderick third row for an hour and a half? That was really good. Also got to see my friend of mine from high school. Turns out he got the lead in Bat Out of Hell, which is the Meatloaf musical. So being able to see him live was pretty cool. And then Matthew Perry was doing his show in London. So again, being able to see that, 4 or 5 rows back and just spending an hour there in the theater is a lot of fun. So you're always getting people coming through. There's, sort of the off-Broadway, more niche productions, as well as all your big hitters as well. So a very vibrant theater scene in London. And if you're less picky on what you see, then they have the same TKTS that they do in New York. So it's very easy to get last minute tickets. Borough Market has got to be one of my favorite places. This is actually on the original London tour, the walking tour that I showed you. This is a great place to go. I actually make a special effort to go here and go here hungry. You know how they say never go to the grocery store hungry? You'll want to do that at Borough Market. This has a food stall from absolutely everything in the world. It's right in front of you. It's fresh. The smells, you can buy everything. You can get food, drink, takeaways, like meats and cheeses. You can get takeaway foods, all right there, all market style. And it's under these railroad tracks that are just, bustling. And it's got this really cool vibe just off the river. I absolutely love Borough Market. So highly recommend it. Go hungry and sample a lot of little things, because you can't ever make a decision of just one thing to choose. Another thing I love to do is high tea. There's a lot of places to do it, and it's definitely an experience. What I would say is high tea is a meal disguised and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So again, make sure you're going to go hungry, because you get the 3 tiers of treats. You get your little sandwiches, you get your scones, or scones as they say here, and your sweet patisserie at the top. You get tea. There's a lot of different places you can do it. One of my favorites is Fortnum and Mason. For those of you who don't know Fortnum and Mason, it's a classic retailer here. They focus a lot on their teas, their biscuits, their packaged goods. They're a great gift store. There's one in Terminal 5 in Heathrow. So every time I forget to buy gifts for people that I'm staying with back in the States, I always go there, and it's just, a really great thing. Anyhow, they've got 4 stories of department store and things like that. And then there's a lovely cafe, and they do a really nice high tea. So if you're going to do high tea, this is a great place to do that. Another thing I love to do is enjoy a drink. There's so many places you can do that. So a couple of places that really stand out for me. One of my favorite brewery tours is called Greenwich Meantime Brewery. It's called Meantime Brewery, but it's in Greenwich, so obviously Greenwich Meantime. This is an interesting tour. So if you like going to breweries, most brewery tours, as you know, as I remember from Boston going to Harpoon and Sam Adams, most of them are about an hour long. And you do about 45 minutes of touring the factory, and you do about 15 minutes of tasting. Now, the Greenwich Meantime Brewing Tour is 2 hours long. And I have to admit, I was a little bit skeptical when I showed up to this one, because it was 2 hours. But I thought, let's try it. And if we don't like it, we can leave. And this guy showed up wearing like sweatpants, hair completely disheveled. He looked like he'd just been out the night before and just woke up. And he gets there and he says, so I've been out the night before, just woke up. I'm like, okay, here we go. He goes, our tour is a little bit different here, but we're the top rated tour. And here's why. He goes, we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of doing 45 minutes of brewery tour and then 15 minutes of drinking, we're going to do an hour and 45 minutes of drinking and then 15 minutes of brewery tour. And sure enough, that's what we did. He was the most engaging speaker I've heard in a long time, just talking about beer, his beer, other people's beer, the history of beer, and drinking all the time. Not stingy. No. We had a good drink there, and it was a 20 pounds in 2 hours well spent. So if you like beer, do that. I also have to give a shout out to Mondo Brewery, which is in Southwest London. This is actually owned by a Northeastern alum. We did an alumni event there one time, and it was probably my favorite alumni event. He was just a really gracious host, opened up the bar, opened up the brewery, and just let the drinks float. And you could see a passion and a generosity in everything he did. So it's definitely not as well known as Greenwich Meantime, but in terms of supporting alumni, it's a great place to go. Another thing that's really popular in London is the London Eye, that big thing that circles around. Personally, I don't like it. I find that it's ill-positioned. You sit in a capsule with a bunch of other people and you just get stuck there for 45 minutes. It costs a lot of money. To me, I would rather do a couple of other things. If you want to see the city from above, I would either recommend the Sky Garden or going up to one of the bars inside the Shard. This way, if you're paying for a drink, or if you're paying to get in, you're at least getting a drink with it. Now, the Sky Garden is free to get in, but I will caution that you have to get tickets ahead of time, and they sell out quickly, and they only put a couple of days or a couple of weeks in advance. It changes. So just check the site frequently. But once you're up there, it's a 3-story atrium. There's tons of gardens in it. There's a restaurant. There's a bar as well. There's an outdoor viewing deck. And if you go around sunset, you get incredible views of the whole city, the Thames, everything like that. And it's really great. So highly recommend the Sky Garden, but you have to book in advance because it sells out very quickly. Okay. Local neighborhoods. So one of the things my wife and I love to do is just go to a different part of town and walk around, explore the parks, find a pub lunch, and visit the neighborhoods. So a couple of my favorite ones, I mentioned Greenwich already. This is sort of in the southeast corner of the city. The Royal College here that you can kind of see down below is a beautiful space. You have the observatory at the top of the hill. That's how you can get up to the hill, and you get these beautiful views of Canary Wharf, and off to your left, central London. So the Greenwich is obviously where they founded the meridian. That's the point zero on the map. Can't remember whether it's longitude or latitude, but one of those. The prime meridian is right there. I wouldn't pay to go in. There's a side gate where you can actually get on the same meridian. Like, they try and charge you 20 pounds to go stand on a little plaque. But it's a never ending line. So just go a little bit further south and it's free. They've also got this boat called the Cutty Sark. That is a really cool museum. This was a boat where, when they were moving, the East India Company was moving boats in and around the world. They created this boat with copper all around the bottom, so that way barnacles wouldn't stick to it and it wouldn't create drag, and it could shoot around to India in like half the time. And they've lifted this whole boat up and created a museum, and you can sit underneath it and walk up on the decks, and it's a really cool way to see it. There's lots of little cafes as well. And if any of you saw the movie Les Mis, minus Russell Crowe's terrible singing, all of the barricade scenes were actually filmed right here in the Naval College. So fun little fact for you. Another place I really like is Hampstead. Hampstead is Hampstead Hill. It's a very rich area, but beautiful little streets. Sorry, Hampstead Heath is the park that's right by it, and you can get up to this area and see great views over the city. A lot of actors live up that way, so highly recommend checking it out. And then the third area that I really like is sort of Notting Hill and Holland Park. Notting Hill is obviously very famous due to the Hugh Grant movie, but you can walk around. You can actually see the bookstore that it was based off of. They've got the Portobello Road Market, which is colorful houses, the street markets. And then you get into my favorite park, which is Holland Park. And New York has some, Central Park and a couple other parks, but what I love about London parks is the diversity of the parks and all the different ways that it fits together. So what I love about Holland Park, you're walking down these beautiful mansions, multi-million-dollar, row homes, white row homes. And you come into this.
Actually, MJ, if you click in,
is there more?
There are some more photos.
Look at that. Perfect. Here we go. Thank you so much. So yeah, I definitely love Holland Park around the seasons. This is Portobello Road Market. Glad I was able to remember all the names without the slide. But it's almost a fairy tale, because you walk up this little path and then you go into things like this Japanese garden. You've got peacocks, you've got, your English rose gardens, and it just kind of opens up and takes you on this journey. Next thing you know, you're back on the high street of, West London. And so it's a really cool park just to walk through and spend an afternoon in.
We do have a couple of questions.
Great. Let's pause here for some questions.
Yeah. So any tips on taking the tube? Is it confusing? Is it easy to figure out the routes?
Yeah. So I would recommend getting, there's an app called City Mapper, which I know exists in the US as well, or using Google is equally as good now. I would 100% recommend the tube, even to and from the airports. There's, if you're coming into Heathrow, use the Heathrow Express to go into Paddington, or just use the tube all the way in. I live on the tube. It's easy to get around. It's easy to use. It is a complex map. I think it's easier than New York, but it's certainly more complex than Boston. But just follow the colors. Everything's colored, everything's signed well. Know where you want to go, and it's the best way to pop around the city.
Great. And do you need a reservation for high tea?
I would get one, just because you can often get discounts associated with it. And sometimes they sell out, but I imagine you can do walk-ins as well. Actually, no, I take that back. Most places you have to do reservations for high tea, and that's not just Fortnum & Mason, that's most places, because there's so many little bits and pieces that they prepare just the number they need, and they don't have extra sitting around. If you want a walk-in high tea at an affordable price, there's a chain called Cafe Rouge that does it well. But if you're going to a fancier place like Fortnum & Mason, you definitely want to do reservations.
As you mentioned with the eye, is there anything else that are touristy but underwhelming?
Yeah. I would say, so there's a couple of either ors that I would recommend. I think the one thing you have to do is just prioritize what you want. Westminster Abbey is a really good example of that. I've been in there once. It's definitely worth it if you like history, but it's not just popping into a church. It is a museum. You have people like Isaac Newton buried there. You have Kingsbury there. You take an audio tour. It takes several hours to get through, and the line can get quite long. So what I would say is, I had a family friend who came over to London a couple of years ago. She showed me her itinerary, and she had basically 5-6 days worth of stuff trying to go into 2 days. And I said, you need to prioritize, otherwise you're just gonna feel disappointed. So what I would say is just think about things that you want to do. To me, the things that are underwhelming as well are some of the personally some of the experiences. Like, people like, if you like getting scared, go to London Dungeons and do that. That's not my thing. There's like a Shrek experience, which is more family. There's an aquarium and a zoo, which to me, you can see those everywhere. There's so much to see in London. I tend to avoid those and focus more on sort of the historical events and the cultural events and the people watching. But to me, the most underwhelming is the London Eye.
And we'll take one more question right now, and then there will be plenty of time to get to some of the other questions once we move a little further down. But as this, I believe, is related to a neighborhood, I feel like it fits in. Any thoughts on Little Venice?
Yeah, it's maybe that's something that's a little bit underwhelming as well. It's nice to walk around. It's cute. It's got some canals. It's got some restaurants, but there are more bustling areas of London that I think are nicer to go to. So if you want to see it, that's fine. There's canals all throughout London, and there's some in the east that I really like that I'll touch on in a bit, that I think are more vibrant areas to go to. There's not too much to do around there, I don't think.
Okay, great. Let's keep going. Keep putting your
Let's do it.
questions in the chat box.
These are
There
good
will be
questions.
plenty of time to keep addressing questions as we move on.
All right, food and beverage. There's too much to even cover, but I'll touch on some of my favorites. The thing I would say is English food is, the English are not known for their food, and they're known for their drink. But Sunday roast is something you definitely want to try. Fish and chips is something you got to try from a good place. But one thing that is great about London is how multicultural it is, and with that comes incredible food and incredible experiences. So here's some of my personal favorites. First is a place called Circus. This is a little bit wild. I went here for a team event one time. There's no sign on the door. It's like there's you wouldn't know it's there. There's two big bouncers at the door, and I was just like, "Is this Circus?" They're like, "Yes." "You have a reservation?" I'm like, "Yes." And like, "Come on in." And she sits down. It's Pan Asian fusion, but then this table in the middle becomes this performing studio. And so every like 15-20 minutes, people would just get up and do different acts. And it went from being very family friendly to definitely more like risque as the night went on, and as the bottles of champagne flowed, it went right in in step there. But there's a lot of fun. It's basically a human circus where people will be eating. They'll clear part of the table. They'll do an act or a performance or something on there, and then they'll just clear off, and food will come back, and life goes on. And it's just this wild atmosphere. There's a guy there that was there. I've seen him a couple of times in London. If you ever want to see something, he does something called Sexy Diablo, that toy that you play with. And he just has this great routine. It's a lot of laughs. It's a lot of fun. This is the type of entertainment that you look for when going out in London. Another place I love is Global Cuisine. If you like sushi, Sticks and Sushi is a classic. There's a couple of locations around London. They just do this. It's, as you can see here, they do sushi and they do sticks of different things that are grilled or fried. And it's just the quality, the pairings are absolutely incredible. So if you're a sushi lover, this is a phenomenal meal, all about sharing and things like that. The other thing in terms of Indian food is this place called the Shoom. Again, a couple of locations around London. My old office used to be above it, and we smelled it all morning. And then we fixed the installation because it was a little bit too intense. But this place is always packed, always has a line. They do an incredible Indian breakfast as well, all throughout the night. Highly recommend it. If you like Indian food as well, Brick Lane in the East is a great place to go. It's basically the street of all these Indian restaurants. Your mom and pop, they've immigrated over, and they just make the best food. And it's all prices are negotiable. So you walk up and down the street and you can negotiate for the best deal and the best offer you want. A lot of the places are BYOB as well, which is still a little bit strange to me that I can show up at a restaurant and take out a bottle of wine. But fine, let's do it. When in Rome. So I highly recommend that. I'm seeing Nando's in the chat as well. Yeah, if you haven't been to Nando's, it's a staple. It's imagine if like KFC were really classy and good, but still fast and cheap. They do the South African peri peri chicken. There's different degrees of hotness. And you know, when you've had a long day, you're walking a lot, and you need a quick meal that's not too expensive, that's a staple, this is a great place to go. So definitely check out Nando's. Oops, bouncing around again. Okay, wine and spirits. So again, too many good places to recommend, but a couple that I really love. One is called Gordon's Wine Bar. This is right in Embankment. So again, right along the river, sort of that midway point of the walking tour. So if you need a break and you're near Covent Garden, you want to just step away for a little bit, Gordon's Wine Bar is the place to be. This is a picture that I took here. It's very clear. There's no beers, there's no spirits. They sell wine by the bottle and the half bottle. And I love wine. I'm not a wine aficionado, but like they will help you through it. There's two places to sit. One is this vault underneath, I don't know what, that's very cozy and smells of wine. I typically opt for the outside. There's a row of tables along this small little alleyway that's just beautiful. It overlooks the park, and there's never enough tables, so you wind up partnering up with somebody else and sharing a table, having a quick word, and then, you know, going through your bottles of wine. But it's a great place when the weather is nice to sip right along a park overlooking the river. Another really cool place that I love is called the Ned. Now, this is in the near Bank. So the Bank is the area of the old financial district. There's a lot of old money there, but it's this old hotel. Sorry, it's the old Bank that they've turned into a hotel, and they've got like 7 or 8 bars there. They've got live music on the weekends. It's just that feeling of opulence when you walk in, and you just feel like you've walked back 100 years and you're worth $1 million. And it's just a really great atmosphere to go with friends and just, you know, enjoy what the Roaring '20s would have been like, you know, 100 years ago. Okay, and then yeah, this is a place called Dinerama. This is owned by a group that has a couple of places. One is up in Dalston, one's down in called Hawker House down in Canada Water. This is the most central in sort of the Shoreditch and Liverpool Street area. Basically, it's called a street feast. And I don't know about you, but after I got out of my 20s, the idea of going to a club and hearing pounding music and not being able to talk to people around you got a little bit annoying. But Dinerama sort of solves that problem. They've got this outdoor indoor experience. They've got like 15 food stalls around you. They've got good music. They've got bars, and you can just talk and have an atmosphere and have a good night out. That can escalate very quickly, but that's a separate story. But it's just a really great place to feel young and in an atmosphere, and you know, not with like 20-year-olds banging their heads at a club. So there's a couple of these locations. Highly recommend it if you want something a little bit different and not just your standard like go to a restaurant, sit down. But if you want some atmosphere, some food, some nibbles, that's great. Plus, you're right near Shoreditch. Shoreditch is one of my favorite areas to go out. I used to work in that that area. There's a ton of great places. Barrio East is one that comes to mind. Up and down Shoreditch High Street, there's a bunch of late night foods there as well. So if you still want to go out and party, you know, Soho is one great place. Shoreditch is another. All right. Should we do some questions, Stephanie?
Yeah, let's take some questions. So Dennis said that he took the number 11 bus and the entire route for a good tour of many parts through London. Are there any other bus routes that are like this?
There is one that does it, and it might be the number 11. I personally haven't done it, but I've heard of that. Like if you want to do the bus version of the walking tour, that's a really good way to do it. And it probably is the number 11. Yeah.
Any recommended bookstores?
I'm not the person to ask for that. Unfortunately, there are definitely some good ones, but Google might provide you a better recommendation than I can, unfortunately.
Fair enough. You can't be an expert in all.
I can't be an expert on everything.
I
know.
It's true. What is the best or cutest town 8 miles or so away from London? So just outside the city. Any cute towns to see?
I mean, if you're limiting me to 8 miles, probably those neighborhoods that I spoke about before or what you're going to want to do. They feel like they're not in London, and they probably are, 5-8 miles away. So going to Hampstead, you're going to feel like you're outside of London. Going to Notting Hill, going to Greenwich, those are a couple of miles outside of central London. You forget that, New York, for example, is an island. They're limited to their space. London and its 36 boroughs is quite expansive. I live probably more than 8 miles away from central London, and I'm still in London proper. So, I would definitely say some of those neighborhoods. If you're looking to get a little bit further out, I would always recommend, an Oxford or a Cambridge. Again, that's going to be a day trip, but, sort of an hour on the train. There's nothing like walking around the streets, especially if you're a Harry Potter fan, a C.S. Lewis fan. There's a lot of connections to Oxford, the history, the architecture, that small town feel. It's a great place. If you're looking for a little bit further out, an hour and a half away is Bath. Highly recommend Bath. That's like where the Roman baths were, where they had, sulfur, the pools of warm water coming up, and a hub of commerce. And then you had the Edwardian period, the Elizabethan periods. They're really great city. Bristol's not too far away. You also have Stratford upon Avon, which isn't too far away. That's where obviously Shakespeare is from, and you can see his birth home and where his house was and get everything Shakespeare. So there's lots of places in and around London itself. But if you're staying within 8 miles, definitely check out the neighborhoods as towns within themselves.
And then one more before we're going to
Okay.
move on. There are so many hotels, there's Airbnb. Any tips on deciding how to find a place to stay, where to stay, any hidden gems to recommend?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So what I like to say is it depends on what you're looking to do and what you're looking to get out of it. But to me, the biggest thing is being near a tube stop. Being able to access that tube quickly and move around is going to be your saving grace. Otherwise, it gets very challenging very quickly. I would also say there's certain parts that you want to just look at the reviews to understand how busy and how noisy the areas are, how safe they are as well. Not that I feel there's unsafe areas as much, but there are definitely places that are better to look at, but they come in pockets. They're all over the place. So if you're only in London for a couple of days and have to go back out towards Heathrow, probably best to stay someplace a little bit closer to the west, because getting across town, can take a while. It's just there's a lot of stops and it's a big town, right? So I would look at things like that. Yeah, reviews are going to be your best bet, and I would say definitely look at the price to room ratio. The rooms in UK are much smaller, and you get a lot less for what you're typically expecting. If I were to pay $300 in Boston, I expect 2 queen beds, the modern, the Hilton, everything like that. You're probably going to get a little bit of a closet in London. So there are definitely nice places to stay, but just, if you go for the cheapest, you will feel like it's cheap. Just because London is an expensive place. So just look at how close you are and figure out that ratio. I know it's not a direct answer, but it is a little bit of a give and take. And if you know people who live in London, definitely just shoot a couple of recommendations across to them. I do that for a lot of friends, or friends of my parents actually, who say where should we stay? Where's a good place? And I'll look at it. But the reviews are a great way to start.
We do have a recommendation from David, Kensington High Street near the Tube.
Yep.
And for anyone else interested in bookstore recommendations, Rick popped in a link for best bookstores in London.
There we go. I'll have to check that out as well.
All right, MJ, go ahead.
All right, I think this is the last section, but this is around hidden gems. So things that I've been here a little bit longer. If you're here for a second or third trip, if you're here for a week or so, these are things that I absolutely love. So the first is exploring history. I'm a big history buff. Churchill War Rooms is right in London. It's right in Westminster. So basically, when World War II happened, Winston Churchill didn't flee the capital. He built his war bunker right underneath the Treasury. And you can still go into it today. It's this little black door down here. You go into it, and so you go up to meet the Treasury, and you go down to the War Rooms. And they've done an incredible job of just leaving it in its original state from the 1940s, the 1950s, and seeing what it was like and seeing the history of it all. So this is a really great museum if you like history. That said, if you like history, like block off a lot of time for this. My dad's a history buff as well. He went in with my mom. My mom had to suffer through 4 hours there, and he was like still only halfway done. Another thing, if you like history, is Bletchley Park. This is a bit outside of London. It's about an hour outside of London on the train. But if you remember the movie with Benedict Cumberbatch, The Enigma Game, this is what it's all based around. And this was honestly one of the most incredible museums I've ever been to. I've never felt so stupid and so intrigued at the same time. Just understanding how they put the first computers together, how they cracked these codes. Like, I had trouble understanding how they did it, let alone actually doing it. But it is an absolutely incredible museum, and I'd highly recommend that movie. Regardless, it's a great story. So there's a lot of little gems like this in and around London in terms of exploring history. Another thing I didn't put on here is called it's called Cleaver Castle or something like that. Hever Castle. It's the castle where the Boleyns lived. So Anne Boleyn. Again, if you want sort of not your huge Windsor castle, but sort of that more manor-like castle, sort of the stage 2 castles, this is a great place just south of London. Another thing I love, as I mentioned before, Oxford is just a great journey, day trip out of London. You can get there and back, but it's got that smaller city feel. It's got that beautiful architecture, and it's still obviously, that prestigiousness of being Oxford, which is great. I love the stat that they were creating calculus at Oxford while the Aztecs were still ruling Mexico, and it just shows you that it's been a hub of intellectual prowess for so long. So yeah, definitely recommend Oxford. Cambridge is a nice alternative as well. Hackney Wick is a cool area. So somebody was asking about Little Venice before. If you want to be in and around the canals, Hackney Wick is great. So when the Red Sox and the Yankees came to London, was it last summer? No, 2 summers ago, because last summer was a write-off. Then I said, this is just across the canals. Let's meet here for our alumni events and pre-gatherings and things like that. This is a really cool, edgy area with a lot of microbreweries, able to just have beers and pizzas right along the picnic. A great place to meet, a little bit more edgy and hipster, and it's just a really cool area to check out. So if you like craft breweries, this is definitely the place to go, because you're going to find the old warehouses turned into breweries. It's got a pretty good nightlife as well. Kew Gardens. This is one of my favorite places, actually. If you love botanical gardens, I grew up in the Philadelphia area, so Longwood Gardens comes to mind there. This is as large, if not larger. They've done an incredible job of having greenhouses and tons of species and just incredible setups. It's a great day. It's near Richmond, so just outside of the main area. Richmond's another area if you want a town near London that's still actually in London. Richmond is a great place to walk around. It's really close to where I live in Kingston. And actually, when I was there 2 years ago with my sister, Dale Truly had his exhibit there. So we had all these stained glass in and around the whole complex. If you like plants or a day out, it's great. And if you like airplanes too, this is right on the final approach for Heathrow. So you get to see a bunch of really big planes really, really low, in case anybody likes that. And that's it. I know it's been a whirlwind, but we have time for questions. Hopefully that's been interesting, and you found a couple of tips that you can pick up on to look at the next time you come to London. But yeah, it's been a pleasure being able to share some of that with everyone.
If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. One that definitely comes to mind is, how are you finding being an American living in London?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's there's actually a lot of Americans over here, and I think so. I work in sales, and I think there's definitely differences that you have to get over there. But it's really lovely, being an American here. There's a good group of expats and communities, and you find that international scene I mean, it feels very, very comfortable. You know, my wife is Spanish, and we both feel at home here, and that's why we've just bought a house and we're not leaving anytime soon. I really love that European charm. It's one of the things that I think I was drawn to Boston is it has that more, walkable feel as opposed to driving everywhere. And yeah, I absolutely love it over here.
Is Lloyd's building worth seeing?
Uh, is that the insurance one?
I am not certain.
I don't know. If it's related to like Lloyd's, the insurance company, it's a really old building, I think, and it would probably be put it this way: if somebody's asking about it, it's probably worth them checking it out because yeah, it must mean something to them.
Okay.
There's a question around
Europe-
Eurostar.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would choose Paris personally. I think Paris is a magical place as much as I like to hate on the French a little bit just because, friendly rivalry. But I love Paris, and it's, 2 hours to get there. I used to have meetings in Paris all the time. So you pop down either for the day or things like that. Brussels is good. But the fact that you can get to Paris in 2 hours from London is a treat. And I would definitely recommend Paris.
Let's see.
The Old Bailey to witness a trial. There is something about that. I think so. I don't know if I'm getting this correct or not, so don't quote me, but I think there's a show, an Agatha Christie play that they were performing in the Old Bailey where you could actually go to it there. I may have that wrong. Maybe that's another one. But yeah, I think you can still get into it. I'm not sure though. You'll have to Google that.
Okay.
Very technical questions today. My goodness.
Definitely giving you some thoughts of things that you need to explore.
Yeah, I've got to go
in
do
your
some
own
more research
backyard.
after this. That's it.
Predictions on when London will open up again.
Yeah, so we have an announcement on Monday. My prediction is they will get the schools back ASAP. We've experienced an 80 to 90% drop in the capital in terms of COVID cases. And the UK is actually third in the world in terms of the speed of vaccination. They've moved the timeline up for when everyone will be vaccinated by 2 months. And so we should be done by the fall, which is really great. My hope is that they wait just a little bit longer and say it's going to be another month. But then when we open, we can properly just never go into lockdown again. It spiked predictably right around the early December period because not Thanksgiving, ironically, but because of Christmas shopping, they shut everything down mid-December, spiked in early January as people tried to move around for Christmas, and then we've been on full lockdown since. So it has worked. It's come down. The vaccination's working, but I think probably around sort of April, May, we'll see things get back to somewhat normal, and then hopefully it's less bumpy going forward until we can get through the full wave of vaccines.
And this might coincide. Best time of year to visit.
Yes. I think basically any time but early July. The reason why is you have 4th of July plus Wimbledon, and it's just a zoo. Every other time is nice. Christmas is lovely. Like Oxford and Regent Street do really great designs. Avoid January and February. It's just miserable, but not so miserable. It doesn't get that cold. Like at most we'll get to freezing. So we'll get to 32 or 0 Celsius, but it doesn't really go below that. So it's not freezing, but it's just dark. You may not realize it, but London's much further north than a lot of the East Coast seaboard, the US. So it just gets dark really early. And then I would say, yeah, your springtime, your fall, your summer, like August is lovely. Yeah, anytime in those seasons, it's just, yeah, it's really good. The thing about London is there's so much to do that there's not really a downtime where it's like, oh, I can't go to the beach or I can't do this. Like there's so much to see year round.
Well, thank you so much, MJ. I think you've made us all a little anxious to think about when our next trip abroad could be. Definitely crossing our fingers that it's sooner rather than later. But this
That's
was
it.
a wonderful way to ease our sadness and
I know.
our isolation. So
Well,
thank you so much.
it's been a pleasure. I hope I can travel as well soon. I'd love to get back and see some family in the States. It's been far too long. Um, but hey, this is the world we're in now. So we can dream and everyone stay safe, and then hopefully we'll be able to travel very soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody.